Hello and welcome to The Charity Show, the podcast for charity insiders by charity insiders. Please rate, follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform. And here's what's coming up in episode 19.
Planes, Trains and Automobiles is my go-to funny movie, and I love that bit in the airport. It's trying to rent a car, and it's like the most amount of swearing in 1 minute on film. It's very, very funny.
The best films have an element of surprise, a twist in them. There's something which knocks you out of your passivity as a viewer. Some of the most successful films in the Charity Film Awards have gone virality built into them, have been those where the charity has understood how to leverage its community to get the algorithm liking it. There are two things at play here, aren't they? One is, can you create brilliant content? The other is, can you leverage your community to make your content viral?
The BBC featured some big news about Smalls this week. It reports charity.
Sorry, Piers, that's big news about Smalls. Okay, I'll let you.
I've been trying to write that all morning, so yeah. So please let me have it and go with it.
Okay, all right, go with it. Go with it.
The BBC reports a charity shop urging people not to use it as a dumping ground for dirty underwear, no less.
Hello and welcome to episode 19 of The Charity Show with me, Tim Beynon, Head of Marketing Engagement at Firefighters Charity.
And me, Piers Townley, PR Manager at the Brain Tumour Charity.
So then, Piers, great today. Great interview we've got coming up very shortly. We're going to be talking to the founder of the Smiley Charity Film Awards, Simon Burton. So today's show is really all about film. So I've got to ask you first off, are you a film buff? What's your sort of go-to movie?
Do you know what? That's quite a coincidence. We had a wider team meeting earlier this week, and that was the icebreaker question. And everyone stumbled over it because you get to a certain age, you've got so many, haven't you? So someone said, you know, if you break it down into genres, would that help? And I was like, no, I've still got loads. But I've got two basically. And that's, if it's a family film, it's Ratatouille. That's our go-to. That's brilliant. But if I want some peace and quiet, it's a film the rest of my family hate. It's an old war film called Where Eagles Dare, and it's got Richard Burton in it and Clint Eastwood. And there's lots of debate about whether it's a Christmas movie as well, because it's all set in the snow and stuff. It is fantastic. And it just reminds me of being very, very little and watching it for the first time with one of my granddads, and like every year since then. But if I put that on or say I'm going to watch that, it's great. I get peace and quiet. I'm allowed in the TV, and everyone else disappears. So those are my two.
Nice. I like an old war movie. I like the Heroes of Telemark. Have you heard of that one? That's a great
I have film. Indeed. Yeah,
it's a cracking film.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you go back now, they're very old films, and just perhaps showing our age quite a lot, isn't it?
What about charity film? Have you got a charity film that sticks in the mind?
This really does hit me. I was privileged enough to go to the awards last year with one of our celebrity ambassadors, the actress Amy Nuttall, as guests of Smiley. And the one that really struck me was a mental health film. I mean, there's loads of films. Don't get us, there's long format films, short films, but the film from Norwich City called You Are Not Alone, it won a gold in its award. It's such a powerful film. It's just a camera straight on with Norwich football supporters, with focusing on two of the blokes there, and there's a twist, there's a flip, and it just sticks in my mind. Even thinking about it now, I get hairs standing up on the back of my neck. And in the week of its release, there's some stats here that are just incredible. 7,500 inbound messages to Samaritans were attributed to the film. So that kind of highlights the impact of that film, highlighting mental health issues. And that accounted for 63% of their total messages of that period as well. And so far, that film alone has had over 145 million views. So some incredible number crunching, but also a real snapshot of how important the Smiley Film Awards are, and all the hundreds of charities that submit entries to it. So yeah, that one stands out for me. Norwich City's film. Go and Google it. Have a trigger warning in beforehand, but it is very powerful and very, very cleverly done for a short film.
Yeah, I know the one. It's a great film, and I know Simon talks about it in the interview shortly. Yes, so it's interesting to hear his thoughts on that as well, in terms of the reason why films like that work. So it's interesting to hear what he says. So stay tuned for that a little bit later on. Movies, though, go on.
Yeah, flip it back at you.
Okay.
You say Mamma Mia or something, Tim. Go on, shock us all.
Care Bears the movie. No. Okay, favourite movie of all time. Again, it is a tricky one because there are so many, but I am a bit old school in terms of I always sort of hark back to the films I enjoyed as a kid. Back to the Future remains, a classic for me. Absolutely love it. And I've really enjoyed actually the fact that my kids embraced it as well now. So it's sort of like, it's kind of like handing it over to another generation. So they love the Back to the Future movies as well. So I love that. Love a funny movie too. And I think John Candy is fantastic. So Planes, Trains and Automobiles is my go-to funny movie. And I love that bit in the airport where he's just after he's finished, he's trying to rent a car, and it's probably it's sort of the most amount of swearing in 1 minute on film. I remember it's very, very funny. And then also sort of old childhood movies. The Goonies is a classic. I love The Goonies. Great films. Although I must say, I think that PG films from the 80s would never pass as PG today.
I was just about to say the thing. The Goonies actually is quite dark. Yeah. I don't think I'd let Willow watch it at her age. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, it's quite dark, but also there's lots of swearing in it. Back in the day, shit wasn't an issue in a PG film. Apparently, you could say shit as many times as you want, and it would just fine. It's PG. Let youngsters look.
We need a little bleed button for this podcast episode. Just bleep it out.
Well, there we go. Yeah, but these days that would never happen in a million years. But there you go. Back in the 80s, PG was a different thing altogether. So yeah, anyway, a charity film for me. This is one that I really had a good think about this, and one that I really remember very well. And it's funny because we were talking about it the other day, just because of sort of what's happening in the news at the moment, and the awful things that happen in Gaza, and I'm not going to get started on what Trump's been talking about this week in regards to that. But I think there's a film by Save the Children from 2016 called 1 Second in a Day. I think that's what it was called. It's about it showed 1 second in the day in the life of a little girl in the UK, as if in this hypothetical scenario that civil war happened in the UK, what would happen, what would that look like. And it was so powerful, and it was a very big production, big budget, big production film. But it really sort of played on people's perceptions of civil war and unrest, in terms of what people think, and the way that, for us all here in the UK, where life is safe and secure, it's nice and easy to think of that as something that happens a million miles away. Therefore, it's just on the news and not something to worry about or even really think about too much. And that's even though it is shocking, you're divorced from it because it's not happening on your doorstep. But this film kind of turns that on its head and really makes you think, gosh, geez, yeah, that could happen anywhere. It's only due to circumstance and in the situation we're in that we're not impacted in that way. But those people, those children who are impacted over there, just like the little girl in this film. It's and that really stuck with me. It's a hard watch, but a really, really powerful one. And again, it sort of shows the power of charity films for making people stop and listen and think. So fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this episode because it is great to sort of dive into the power of film, not only big budget stuff like that Save the Children film, but how people can do amazing things on a shoestring budget as well. So yeah. Fascinating stuff. Right. It's going to be really interesting.
And the short films sometimes hit the spot, don't they? Which is a very difficult thing to do. It's the same as writing copy. The short story, the short review, the short film, often a lot harder to do and get that message across. Yeah. And this is something that, as you say, Simon talks about.
Power of a good idea. That's the amazing thing with film, isn't it? So let's dive into it, shall we? Today, we've got a fantastic guest joining us, a man who knows exactly what makes a charity film stand out and how powerful storytelling can drive impact. We're talking to Simon Burton, the founder of the Smiley Charity Film Awards. Now, if you work in the charity sector, you've probably come across these awards before. The world's leading celebration of cause-based film. Since launching in 2016, they've grown into an incredible platform that showcases the very best in charity storytelling, helping organisations amplify their messages and connect with new audiences. And Simon himself is an entrepreneur, event organiser and passionate advocate for the power of film to inspire change. So in this conversation, he shares what makes a truly great charity film, what the judges are looking for, and he gives us his advice for charities looking to make an impact through video. This is a conversation packed with insights, and we're bringing it to you in two parts. In this first section, Simon talks to us about the origins and growth of the Charity Film Awards and why storytelling is so crucial for charities today. Then, later in the programme, we'll dive a little deeper into what makes an award-winning film and his top tips for charities looking to create their own.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for coming on the show. We saw firsthand how amazing the awards were last year when the actress Amy Nuttall performed her song on the night in support of the Brain Tumour charity. And as guests, we just saw those amazing amount of films that were submitted and went through the process. It was such an amazing night, showcasing some incredible charity storytelling. So first off, Simon, for anyone who's maybe new to the sector or not quite aware, what are the Smiley Charity Film Awards?
Thanks for having me on the show. The Smiley Charity Film Awards are the world's largest charity film festival, effectively, and they're structured in the form of a traditional awards for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we'll discuss, but mostly because we want to help the charities share their films more widely. So they're 7 years old now. They've grown from reasonably humble beginnings to now there were 520 charities entered this year, and over the course of the campaign, more than 1 million members of the public have voted. And we've driven hundreds of billions of additional views of the films that take part. I guess the biggest takeaway is the average film taking part in the awards adds at least 50% to its views.
Which is incredible. I mean, those figures are staggering, aren't they? Did you, thinking way back to when they were first launched, did you think it would ever become this big? Did you kind of think, we're onto something here?
One of the pieces of inspiration was a film that Greenpeace had around the time of the Lego movie, and they pastiched the Everything is Awesome song. And it had millions of views. And that was one of my eureka moments, which is, why are more charities not doing this? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So so I knew that charity films that were well executed were capable of driving huge views.
So what was your background, Simon? How did you come to be, one of the founders, one of the forerunners of the Film Awards?
Yeah, so I was an event and PR guy, and I had started running awards. I launched the Great British Entrepreneur Awards with some business partners, some other people. I'd launched the Football Business Awards and the Sports Business Awards, and I was becoming really fascinated by the way in which awards told such good stories, really unlocked content and ideas, and celebrated in a way which gave huge amplification. And this is the great bit of the story that ties into the Greenpeace movie. I live in Wimbledon, and every day at the station there were chuggers, and I loathe them. I just loathe them. And bothered another day by another set of fundraisers, and I thought, this is like 2017. There has got to be a better way for charities to go about positioning themselves and raising funds than this. And so I then went and started researching the sector and realised how big it was, and realised how many charities were making films, many of which were just effectively never seeing an audience. And I put that idea together with my awards thinking and came up with the structure, which is broadly exists in the same format to this day.
Simon, can I ask you, what was the hardest part of setting up the awards? So when you've had the idea, you think this is a great opportunity to showcase and champion the sector and some of the amazing films that are created. How do you then go about actually setting that up? And what was the hardest part of doing so? So
I was very lucky. I had a philanthropist who gave some funds to allow for the first website and the platform to be set up. There's quite a lot of powerful tech behind the Charity Film Awards to make it work. But we had immediate interest from charities who wanted to celebrate their films. So I guess there were lots of objections at the time. The charities won't have a new film every year. How will you monetize? It's those kind of questions. But I actually just wanted to prove it would work. I just wanted to prove it would work in the first instance. I think, let me take the question to the next stage, which is, it is still very difficult to get the very big charities. I generalize here, so let's be clear, I'm making a generalization, but the very big household name charities, for them, their film, brackets films, because they'll probably make several during the year. Getting them to understand that the mechanic of the awards is really, really powerful for them amidst a gazillion other things that they're doing is still hard. And so we still have a sense that many of those household name charities are just missing out because they won't put a little bit of shoulder to the wheel.
Do you think though that it's getting easier as time goes on, as the years pass and the awards get more well known? Are you bringing more of those bigger charities on board, and do you think the prestige around the awards is growing as a result?
The prestige of the awards is very, very high, and we have no short. Let's be clear: the big name charities enter, so their digital teams enter, their video teams enter. They're proud of their work. I understand the challenges of these big organisations, getting the rest of the organisation to understand that they should support for the film is the challenge. We frequently have, we'll talk about voting, which is one of the core mechanics of the awards, but it's almost certainly true that the household name charities garner fewer votes than the charities which are smaller than them, because they don't ask for the votes in the same way. Whereas the smaller charities recognise this is a game-changing opportunity for them and ask for the vote.
Yeah, of course. That's really interesting. Let's come on to voting in a minute. I'm really keen to talk to you about what your thoughts are about film as an awareness-raising tool. Obviously, we know the power of film. It can really help drive fundraising, help drive awareness, and is so vital for charities. But in an age when we're bombarded by images and video all the time at every turn, social media is taking over everyone's lives and everything is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And as a result, I think, public's attention spans are getting shorter. You've got 2-3 seconds to grab someone's attention before they swipe on to the next thing. How hard do charities, do you think, have to work now with that in mind to make their films stand out?
There's two questions there. The first is, we live in a digital age where video is the primary medium. So I just don't think charities can ignore it. That's the first thing is, this is what exists. This is how it works. You've got to make it, you've got to adapt and blend to it. The second part of the question has so many answers, Tim, so many answers. So the first thing is, they are frequently too long. Time is of the essence. And many charities struggle for a number of reasons, which we should discuss separately, to make their story short and compelling. But when they do, all of the issues you discussed, everything that makes the digital age amazing, comes into play. But if they're too long and they're not succinctly and powerfully told, then that is a waste.
Yeah. I mean, I can, just talking personally, I think I've seen that over recent years, especially. I think things like TikTok are driving that sort of, in a way you could argue to obviously it's dependent on the channel. There is a place for long form content. YouTube's probably the go-to place if you want to watch something that's more than a minute long. But the things that grab people's attention in terms of long form content, that seems to be, there's much less of that. TikTok is driving this and the like is driving this demand for really short, powerful content. So do you think that's also driving a change in creativity amongst teams to be thinking now in terms of trying to capture attention in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, rather than thinking about telling a 3-5 minute story?
Yes, absolutely. I want to put an addendum on the idea there, though, which is it mustn't just be short, it must be shareable. And by shareable, I mean, it must make the audience want to share it. It must want the audience to share that charity's message, that charity's story. So just being short is not a virtue. You've got to be short and good.
Yeah. And you've got to tell a story in a short amount of time. And I think that's a real challenge for people, because I think traditionally, those you look at charity films of old. I'll come on to leads on to my next question, really, about the fact that traditionally charity films have been about telling a story, getting to know somebody and getting them the emotion of a story across through a case study film or whatever that might be. And also, now you've got to do that in a really condensed, in a short way. And do you think as well as that, and again, I'm sort of asking two questions at the same time here, but do you feel that there's a degree of sort of empathy fatigue? I've heard that talked about before as well, in terms of the fact that those sort of traditional heart-wrenching, tear-jerking films that are telling a story that might be long-form content, they're maybe not as effective in the kind of fast-paced world we live in these days. Is that true, would you say? Or do you think charities are just approaching that in a different way now?
Yes, but I want to refine that, because I am not unsympathetic to the charities' dilemma when telling the story. I understand there are numerous stakeholders who need to be accommodated, accounted for, recognised, but that is a challenge. But it is a challenge. So the follow on from that is that I see no shortage of huge outpouring of response and enthusiasm for films which deliver powerfully. And some of the best films deliver powerfully in very, very traditional ways. But they're not, the films aren't trying to reinvent the medium. They're using all the tropes and styles that have existed for. I've seen some charity films from the 50s that have existed for 70 years, but they're just doing them exceptionally. And there are other films which break that and do something entirely new and different. And I think there are many, many dilemmas for a charity making a film and a charity filmmaker. And so the next one is purpose. What is the film trying to do? And that's where you get another set. So on the one hand, you've got lots of stakeholders who feel the need to be acknowledged or recognised in the film. So that already makes it long. And then you've got, why are we doing this? And you'll have all sorts of shouts for, well, to move people, to make them donate, to make them, and it just becomes messy. Clarity is the issue here. A purpose, clarity of purpose.
I think you've just touched on the next question then, Simon, because I was going to say, what makes a good charity film, which is a very succinct question, but also flipping huge question. So shareability, sense of purpose, engagement, but that ability to cut through in our multi-channeled world now, would you say that's becoming almost the key thing that charities have to cut through?
Yeah, I think in general, you need to find a way of cutting through. And the best films, in my opinion, but it's reflected by the judges in terms of the films they pick, the best films have an element of surprise, a twist in them. There's something which knocks you out of your passivity as a viewer. So that is in general true. But to follow on from that, some of the most successful films in the Charity Film Awards public voting component that have got virality built into them through the awards have been those which are not particularly special, but where the charity has understood how to leverage its community to get the algorithm liking it. So there are two things at play here, aren't they? One is, can you create brilliant content? The other is, can you leverage your community to make your content viral because they're passionate about your cause? And one of my big learnings from the 7 years of Charity Film Awards is that in both of those mixes, in general, it is what I would describe as the single issue disruptor charities who are best at it. So they tend to focus on just one thing. They tend to really tie that emotionally into their community and their supporters. And their supporters are going on the journey with them. And those charities are, on the whole, a bit younger but they're not really young. So they've been around a few years. So I see it a little in the entrepreneurial space. This is this outpouring of people who want to say, well, this isn't working in the system. And how can we change that about this single issue? And on the whole, I think those are the charities that make both the most powerful films and find it easiest to leverage their audience to drive that narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's really, really fascinating. So it's the element of that short story, that element of storytelling, which is as old as we are, but then being adapted so that it can be used for this modern day audience. Those two things have to sit side by side.
Yeah, but it's just one. So this is, I think we have a kind of in-joke, and you can go to the website and look at this. We've got 520 films. I would bet you 300 of them are called Someone's Story. So, no, I understand why you're representing someone who you want to support. That's just not going to shift someone who's not immediately in your network in a powerful way. So already you've got this inbuilt sense of who the stakeholders are and how we need to reflect them, which I think can be an impediment to effective storytelling. Whereas you look at, let me give you two examples, because I was where it's just about a thing. So Born Free by Born Free Foundation, which was our winner 3 years ago. It's an animation. It uses the Born Free songs. It's got a lot going for it. But it was just about the issue of breeding lions in captivity for the sole issue of hunting them. That's all that film is about, and it has a huge twist in the tale. It just does everything right. It doesn't focus on the other stuff. It doesn't try to suddenly make people care about the ivory trade or suddenly make people care about the support workers who are out in Africa doing the work. It's single-minded. And the other example that I think does this really, really well, actually you can ask me some other examples, so I'm going to change my mind. I'm changing my mind about my example, is actually our first ever overall winner, which was a St. John ambulance film called The Unchokables, which is a 90-second short with some animated desk items and a jelly baby and a peanut and stuff, talking about what's to do if your baby is choking. All it does. If your baby is choking, here are the things that you do. Now, it had celebrity voices in it, which would have helped. But to my earlier point, the reason that film was so spectacular was everyone who saw that film, who knew someone with a baby, sent them that film because it was fun and funny and it addressed one issue: what's to do if your baby is choking. That's the trick. Just one thing.
And then you did go back to it's shareable though as well, isn't it? It can be easily sent because of our multimedia, multi-channel, multi-platform age that we're in. Would you think that has had a huge effect then, Simon? Well, obviously it has for the types of films, but it's leveled the playing field for a lot of charities. It means that the big monster charities and the little ones can compete almost on the same level.
I think absolutely. And to my point earlier, the smaller charities, I mean, small is a relative term here, but even the smallest charity can leverage its network to make a very, very low budget film really shareable and fun, but it has to meet the other criteria.
I think I could listen to Simon's film insight all day long, Tim, and I definitely want to go and check out the nominees for this year's Smileys too. But before I do, before we rejoin Simon for part 2 of that interview, what have you seen in the news this week?
Well, this week, actually, it's not what I've seen in the news, it's what's come to us. So we heard this week, dropping into our charity show inbox, which you can get to by emailing us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com. We heard from Robert Grew, Fundraising Development Manager at Deafblind UK. He emailed us to tell us about some hugely exciting news from his charity. So I'm going to read out his email, if that's okay. He told us, "Dear Tim and Piers, I hope this finds you both well. I love listening to the charity show." Great start. Thank you very much. And myself, I work for Deafblind UK, the only national charity representing the estimated 450,000 people living with deaf blindness, combined sight and hearing loss across the country. Started in 1928 by a group of deafblind people and their carers, we are fast approaching our 100th anniversary and are seeing demand for our support services growing as the number of people living with deaf blindness is expected to reach 610,000 by 2035. Now he goes on to tell us, "I wish to share some very exciting news with you. Deafblind UK has just announced the opening of a Centre for Education and Research at Birmingham City University. This is a brand new initiative which is the first of its kind in the UK. It is a dedicated centre where we can carry out much needed research into deaf blindness. We will work with many more researchers and professionals to better understand the impact of deaf blindness and identify the best possible support for those who need it." It's an amazing initiative. Fantastic that Robert got in touch to tell us all about it. And he also just gives us a little bit of detail in terms of what this new Centre for Education and Research will do. He tells us that it will connect researchers, practitioners and individuals living with deaf blindness to expand knowledge and awareness. It'll train junior researchers in the workforce to become future leaders in deaf blindness research and practice. And it will address the urgent need for understanding and innovation in supporting those affected by dual sensory loss. So some amazing work, and I'm really grateful for Robert reaching out to us, telling us all about it. So fantastic to hear that. So please do, if like Robert, you've got an amazing new initiative or amazing new piece of work that you're working on, let us know about it, and we're more than happy to share it here on the Charity Show. So please do get in touch. And Robert says that he's hoping to persuade his CEO, Nikki Morris, to come on to a future episode to tell us more about it. So Nikki, the door is open. Come and join us on the show and tell us a little bit more about this exciting new initiative. But what have you got, Piers? What have you seen this week?
Well, this week is a combination of stories, but it's all around the high street and it's all around the charity shops on the high street. They're in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons, really. And this is something, obviously, on virtually every high street in the UK, there is some sort of a charity shop. But casting off is the news that Scope has proposed closing most of its charity shops. In an article in Civil Society, the charity said it had forecasted that its retail operations would make a loss of £1.5 million this financial year. Just a huge sum of money. The disability charity last week opened a consultation on proposals to close 77 out of its 138 shops around the UK. That's around 200 of Scope's 458 retail staff may be made redundant under the proposals, while approximately 2,000 of its 4,300 odd shop volunteers could also be impacted. So huge implications. Chief Executive Mark Hodgkinson said, "Our shops have helped us raise vital income to support our work with disabled people and families, but the high street has growing trading challenges, which we want to now firmly recognise and address. This situation isn't confined to Scope," he goes on to say. "All retailers have been hit with a greater shift to online shopping, and we are facing rising rents, soaring energy costs, increased staff costs, and the cost of living squeezing customers." So the sad news.
I think that is shocking. It actually sort of flies in the face a little bit of sort of recent news that we've heard about the charity shop sector booming. So it's interesting to hear that as a sort of stark contrast. What is the actual lay of the land?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get some comments. And I mean, I don't know about you, but my kids are doing a lot of their kind of charity shop kind of shopping online still. The likes of Vinted and stuff is big in our house. I'm wondering if this has an impact, especially maybe on that generation as people, get older and do or do not use charity shops on the high street. But sticking with them, it's charity shop dumping. This is actually something I've seen actually just this week. And the call, is it a growing trend? The BBC featured some big news about Smalls this week. It reports charity.
Sorry, Piers, that's a big news about Smalls. Okay, I'll let you.
I've been trying to write that all morning. So yeah. So please let me have it and go with it.
All right, go with it. Go with it.
BBC reports a charity shop urging people not to use it as a dumping ground for dirty underwear, no less. Natalie Shaw, who runs the Doris Barnum Dog Rescue in North Highcombe near Lincoln, I'm not sure whether I've got that right, North Highcombe or North Hickam near Lincoln, said some of the items people donated beggars belief, she quotes. She goes on to say, "I don't know how they even have the nerve to bring these things to the charity shop. We're not a tip," she said. Miss Shaw added that people also regularly turn up to donate kitchen items that are broken, dirty, ripped or stained. And most of the time, customers are understanding, she says, but some can be abusive when they get turned away. She goes on to quote, "It can be quite overwhelming. Some of them don't understand that we can't take in everything." And this is a serious issue, I think, Tim. I mean, anecdotally, some of our local charity shops on our high street are having to remind people not to leave donations or bags outside of hours, outside their shops, saying that they can get fined by the local council and then they have to pay to have it taken away because it's just classed as refuse then, especially if the weather's been bad, you just got soaking wet donations. So people are using them to dump stuff, unwanted stuff, when actually the sector or the charity shops are just saying, look, just think twice about it. And obviously, as Doris Barnum says, it's not a tip. Don't just dump your stuff on them.
Yeah, we all seen it, haven't we? You're absolutely right. Even driving around where we are here in Fleet, you do see it around the charity shops. People just dumping bags overnight, just assuming that that's a fine thing to do. I see it a lot on the Blue Cross charity shop, the animal welfare shop on our high street. It's a lot. I mean, there are mattresses and all sorts been dumped out there. Yeah, I mean, we donate to charity shops, as I'm sure you do too. But you do, and you put some thought into what you're going to give. So, and also when you're, inevitably as the children grow and as you sort through clothes and stuff, we end up sort of sorting through what's going to go to a recycling bank, what's going to go to a charity shop. You don't give the charity shop the rubbish stuff that's ripped and stained and no one's going to buy. It's just the wrong thing to do. So what is wrong with people? Why do they do that? I just don't get it. Strange.
More work and more financial burden on the shops themselves. It seems like a no-win situation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. One other piece of news for everybody. Starting next week, we're going to be serving up an extra dollop of the charity show during the weeks that we don't have a main show. So, dropping every other Monday between our main shows, you can listen to the Charity Show Bites. 10 to 15 minutes of the two of us, Piers and I, discussing topical issues and topics from across the sector, as well as responding to the comments and questions you raise from the questions and polls that we post on LinkedIn. So make sure to follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't done so already. Subscribe or follow the show on your usual podcast platform and get ready to tuck into the first episode of the Charity Show Bites next Monday.
In part 2 of our interview with founder of the Smiley Charity Film Awards, Simon Burton, we find out what film from the incredible Smiley back catalogue puts a lump in his throat, and what advice he'd offer charities of all sizes in regard to using film to create a lasting impact with an audience.
Quite often, I think people think about film in big budget terms, big budget, big production, need to spend a huge fortune, get some celebrities on board, make an arty film and get it on the telly and that kind of stuff. But I think we're seeing now these days that that's absolutely not the case. Do you think then that with that in mind, the fact that it has leveled the playing field in terms of creating awareness, and it is just much more now today about a good idea, about creativity and a good idea, not about budget and production?
It's listen, big budget, great production is going to help. But if there's not a creative idea in there, you're exactly right, Tim. I was going to say, I think it's perfectly possible to have a creative idea, to go on to 5 more people per hour and get explain a video made for a couple of £100 that could win Charity Film Awards. But it would have to be creative. It would have to have a brilliant script, and it would have to be creative. And that is not a fair thing to ask every charity to have in their wheelhouse. Right? It's just not necessarily a skill set you have, but it is the difference. Exactly, that's the creativity.
Yeah. Do you think as well, because we're sort of at the Firefighters Charity, we're kind of going through a period at the moment, we're sort of looking at our social channels, looking at what we do and thinking about how we could do things differently. And it's been interesting, for me, looking at the corporate world, looking at what they do as well, and looking at some of the things that they do well. I wonder whether or not charities need to do that a bit more, and what your thoughts are on that. Just one example, I know that we talked as a team, we talked about how good Currys are at their TikTok at the moment, and they're doing this super stuff, and they just asked their employees to do it. It was all shot on their own cameras, on their own phones, super cheap. There's very little production to it, just good ideas, very effective, and they seem to be taking the marketing world by creating headlines as a result.
Our winner 3 years ago was Surfers Against Sewage, who consistently make brilliant films. I mean, the content's beautiful, is to see, right? But their film they made during the pandemic was called Thank You C, and it was about recycling, and the entire film was made from recycled clips from their members who'd sent them on their various social channels, right? So and with a beautiful soundtrack. But that's a great example of statement. And it's just creative. This wasn't de facto expensive. This was using the existing content. And one thing that says, if you're going to use your supporters to create that content, you've got to have a good editing process, and you probably need someone who's got a bit of charisma about them. This sounds like no one says these things in the charity space, but it's true.
Yeah. Right. I think that's very true when it comes to voiceover as well. You need if you haven't got a good voice telling that story, I think sometimes that you really struggle to get your point across. It's amazing how those little ththings make a massive difference.
Being really careful about the soundtrack. But I hear the same. I hear the same library music again and again and again. Frankly, there's probably some young person in the charity who's got one of these and a bit of creativity who could make spectacular videos. But that's easy for me. That's easy for me to say. I want to stress this. In general, it's easy for me to say.
But that's an interesting point as well, Simon. Like with anything in comms or marketing or creative, any sort of that creative side of things, it's making sure that in that charity you do include the youngster who's got that possibly, and you don't silo it into a traditional, this film sits with our creative, our designers, our comms team. It actually needs to have all input from all over the charity then. Would you say that that's possibly something that some charities maybe was?
No, because I think you get a camel then. You get designed by committee. And so, one thing I would say is that many of the household name charities, their in-house teams are superb and they produce brilliant content because they know what they're doing. What I'm saying is that you've got to have harsh editing and creativity. Those are the secret sauce.
Yeah, I agree. So with all of that in mind and thinking back over 7 years, do you have one film that has stayed with you and that has had the most impact on you personally?
Can I have two?
What do you reckon, Piers?
Yeah, go on then. Simon, you can have as many as you like. Your enthusiasm for the film awards is what comes across.
Thank you. I have watched all 3,000 films. So
that's a lot of films.
I think I should be in the Guinness Book of Records for the person who's watched the most charity films. So my first is the first film we ever showed as a winner. So it's a charity called Communities for Development, who operate in sub-Saharan Africa. And the room, I knew the film, I'd seen it, obviously, but the room didn't know what to expect. The room thought we were going to have an evening of poverty porn. That's what the room's expectations were. This was a one-off event and we'd celebrate some amazing tear-jerking films, but we wouldn't change their mind about what a charity film was. So the film is called Welcome to Balambuli Valley, and it pastiches a Silicon Valley startup film, but based in the Balambuli village. And so this is a brilliant example because it addresses the people who are speaking are the villagers. But they know they're taking the mickey out of this Silicon Valley film, and they talk. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Just go Google Welcome to Balambuli Valley, and it's so funny. It's genuinely funny. And so it's very important to me because the audience just laughed out loud immediately and went, oh, wow, this is different. This isn't what I thought was going to happen. And it's just spectacular because it takes an existing trope, the kind of disruptor, startup, entrepreneur video, and it overlays it with this African village. It's full of hope and positivity. And the original film was then tied to a crowdfunding campaign where you could fund the things that were talked about in the film. It's just brilliant. And it's one of my favourites, one because it shatters expectations, and it was the first film we ever showed in BAFTA. So just like a special moment. My second is One More Minute so I can't even talk about that quiet. Is One More Minute by Child Bereavement UK. And there is nothing oddly unusual about the film. It's a talking heads. There were some celebs in there were some not celebs. It's talking heads, and they are asked, you never hear the question, they are asked to describe what they would do if they had one more minute with the person they've lost. And I now know, so I used to say, so you can feel I'm just so emotional about this film. It's just incredible. But the audience, when we showed it, it was the overall winner in the year it participated, the audience there was just this silence afterwards, except for people crying. One of the people in the room made a very major donation immediately to the charity because they were so moved by it. It doesn't ask for a donation, by the way. It's just trying to move you. And it's very standard. So Tim, to pick up on the question, there is nothing about this film that we haven't seen 100 times in charity film, but the authenticity of the voices. And now knowing how that authenticity was captured, so I've spoken to the team, I understand what they did to make that authenticity is very, very powerful. And it's just an astonishing piece of filmmaking that even 4 years later, I can't talk about without being moved.
I asked you earlier if there was still a place for the tearjerker, and I think you just answered that. There
will always be some tearjerkers in the films. The Carers UK film that won a couple of years ago, enormously tearjerker. The Alzheimer's Research UK film, which won last year, Piers, you'll have seen that at the awards last year, is incredibly powerful. Like they leave you stunned and difficult to not be moved. But the awards, fortunately, tends to balance those against upbeat and humorous, or just perhaps more expansive ideas. So I think there's a place for tearjerking. I'd come back to, if you want your film to be a tearjerker, make it a tearjerker. Don't suddenly get distracted by the shiny story over here. One, focus really hard. And it's really interesting in that context. Film a few years ago from a veterans charity, Scotty's Little Soldiers, does again, it's a very standard setup, very tear-jerking, very powerfully done, very, very authentic.
Really interesting. The two examples you picked there, very different. You've got one there which is all about busting preconceptions and myths and misconceptions and framing something differently. And you've got one that's very, very traditional. So it's interesting that clearly both still, they both work, but very, very different in terms of their approach.
Yeah, I'd say if you're going to be traditional, be excellent. If you're going to use a traditional format, be excellent. There is no room for not excelling. But they work. And they were both widely shared because the audience, the supporters felt compelled to share because of their connection to the story and the message.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Simon. I mean, I was just going back, as you're going on, I'm just thinking of all the films that I saw last year when we attended the awards, and having that moment that where it flips, having that moment where the rug is pulled out from you, are the ones that just give the storytelling or the cause that, oh my God factor. Do
you have one you remember particularly?
Yeah, one that even if I was talking about it now, you were getting emotional about the one you've just mentioned. The hairs go on the back of my neck when I think about the Norwich FC mental health one. And all it is just two mates at the football game, framed on, and it just tells that story. And then at the end of it, there's the twist, there's the rug being pulled away from you. And it is literally, I can feel it now. And it's like, oh my God.
And the truth is, you're watching that film and you know what's coming, and yet you don't.
You don't, no. And it's just, it has that jaw-dropping, stereotype, cliche approach to it. And when we went to the Film Awards last year, you saw so many of those. And you're right, some of them were a minute long, and some of them were the longer ones. But the ones that were a minute long, the ones that had that impact, there was a proper gut punch. And I think that's just what made the awards and the charities and the films that they did just like, oh my Lord, this is an amazing thing to be. If you get it right.
I also think this is an important point that perhaps I don't make enough. There is something special being in a room with close to 1,000. It will be 1,000 this year at the awards. 1,000, it'll be 1,200 probably. With 1,000 people who represent charities the length and breadth of the UK and internationally, and community interest companies and social enterprise companies. Being in a room with them, the charities pay nothing to be involved at any stage. And they get 2 free places to attend, and everyone's in their glad rags. And that sense of celebrating what this amazing sector does in our country and in the world. Everyone's there to celebrate because they've been on this journey. So the first thing is that sense of collective. We're all together, we're all celebrating, win, lose or draw. What you do is amazing. But the second thing is when you have a room of that many people whose hearts are in the right places, and you show them these films on a big screen with big sound, you suddenly have that collective shared moment, and that can be quite powerful. And that's so, to go back to where we started, clearly you're not going to have that on TikTok because your shared moment it's entirely personalized. It's just you watching it, right? But when you're in a room with 1,000 people watching it, feeling the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, then that becomes special, and celebrating those people. Because we're not just celebrating the film, we're celebrating the people who made that film and the organizations they represent and the work they do. So for everything I say about that single-mindedness of message in the film, the ripple effect goes through everything the charity does.
Yeah, it does. You see, it isn't quite, when you speak of it in those terms, it is quite a thing. It is quite a thing.
Yeah. It's impossible not to be moved, right, when you're in that room.
Mm. Yeah, that collective scene of it. Simon, when you let's talk a little bit about the voting. How do you engage the public? How do you engage the charities in the Smiley Charity Film Awards? How does that voting process work? How has it evolved, for example, over the last couple of years?
Yeah, there's a significant change this year, actually. So I think the easiest way to conceive of it is it's strictly come dancing for charity films. So the first and the most important thing to say is that the charities get segmented not by the type of cause they work for, but by turnover. So so we're attempting to make it fair. The audience size has some parity. So that's the first thing. And we also segment by length. So if films are over 8 minutes, they go into a different set of categories. So there's some nuance about that. But the goal is to make sure that a charity of size X is competing against other charities of size X. So the charities can put their films onto the website. It takes about 7 clicks. That is it. Just not a difficult process. And then they create their own profile page on the website. We've talked at the top about the complexities of the platform, and they ask their supporters to vote for them. That's it. And that's important to us as a starting point, because frequently charities have forgotten to ask for anything but money. And this is a unique moment. Would you vote for us? Now, many of those votes turn into donations, but that's not the prima facie reason for doing it. So they vote, and then we have tools which allow that vote to be shared on social media. So now I'm sharing, I've voted. And so, as I say, over the course of the awards, we've had more than 1 million members of the public vote. Historically, there were 2 rounds of voting. This year, after requests from the charities that felt they were having to do more work than they felt comfortable with, there's only 1 round of voting. The films with the highest scores in the public vote get sent to the judges to judge. And then on the night of the awards themselves, we show the winners as judged by the judges, but we also announce the winners in each category of People's Choice. So you have 2 chances to win, basically. You could win as voted for by your audience, and you could win the judges prize. What's very interesting is that we've seen over time that sense of how to engage change. So it's not purely digital. Teenage Cancer Trust did a brilliant campaign once at Seven Oaks Station, and they just put a vote for us now on the station's news agents. Seen all sorts of people manifest in different ways, having events and asking, will you vote for us now? And I've had some watch parties as well, where 2 people from the charities have come to attend the awards, and the rest of the gang have had a big party, back like an Oscars party, back at base, all watching and sharing.
That was really interesting. I do remember last year that a lot of the watch parties was quite a big thing and quite an unusual way of getting involved. So that leads on to the next question: is how can people who have not been lucky enough to be invited to go and see it live, how can they get involved? Can they follow it and be part of the evening?
Yeah, absolutely. So Smiley Charity Film Awards is on all of the social media channels you'd expect. And with interest in different kinds of engagement across the platforms. So the engagement on TikTok is very different to the engagement on LinkedIn, as you can imagine. And all of the films, all the 500 charities who've entered this year, all of their films are promoting themselves through those channels. So that's the core place. But if you go to smileycharityfilmawards.com, you can search for your favourite charity name. You can search by UNSDG of the charity. You can search thematically. I mean, there is a search function. We don't categorise like that, but you can search in that way. And then you find the charities and you press a button and register and vote. And just to be clear, we have to cut your email to make sure we don't get duplicate votes, so people aren't spamming the system. But you can vote for more than one film. And finally, on the night, March the 20th, at Indigo at the O2, so a new venue this year, a bigger venue, so we can accommodate more people and have more networking and all sorts of shiny entertainment aspects to it. On the evening of March the 20th, you can watch the live stream. Again, on smileycharityfilmawards.com, you can watch the live stream happen. And we show all the films that win.
Just one point as well, Simon, and it's to say, you've got the big, well, I'm not going to name them, you've got the big charities, obviously with, multi-million pounds. But it's what advice would you give to a smaller charity, a really small charity that is thinking, oh, we've got a really good idea for a film, but how are we going to be up against these big ones? How do you make the smaller charities not feel daunted? What would be your advice to them?
They're going to be up against other charities turning over less than £100,000 a year. That's the first thing, is that and we do not share the vote numbers per charity, because it's just, what help is that? This charity gets 2,000 votes, this charity gets 20 votes. That doesn't make anyone feel any better. But every vote you drive is an additional view of your film, an additional piece of engagement. And as I said previously, the average charity gets more than 50% views. Most of them double their views. So even if you're small, and you've had 1,000 views on YouTube, if you engage properly with Charity Film Awards, and we give you all kinds of resources to help you do that, all completely free, you'll get to 2,000 views, right? You're doubling your investment in that film. I think a small charity that tells its story with focus and brevity has a real chance.
Just final question for me. Fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. You've covered an awful lot of ground there. What are your hopes? What does?
Well, obviously they're not solely my hopes and aspirations now. It's the Smiley movement team who now own and drive the awards, and their investment and support and what they have done has taken it from a nice idea I had into the spectacular event that it is now. I could not possibly have done that on the resources I was operating with. So huge credit and gratitude to them for what they've turned it into. They want to continue growing it. They want to look at areas where they can expand, where they want to look at where they can offer some of this advice direct to charities about how to make more effective films. They want to find new mechanics for sharing those films and those stories more widely. There is a storytelling component to this that Smiley care about desperately. And so everything that can be done to drive that and amplify the awards and grow them. Possible international expansions, who knows? That there are... If I think about the first time I pitched this to somebody and all the objections and the fact that this year we're going to be at the Indigo 2 with a celebrity host and a bunch of celebrities on stage and 520 charities taking part and hundreds of millions of global views and stuff, I think, this hasn't finished growing.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we put all the links that everyone needs in the show notes, and we'll also tweet about it and post it on social, make sure everyone gets as many people checking out those films as possible. But Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
In each episode of the Charity Show, we want to celebrate our sector superstars, those incredible people working, volunteering and fundraising across our sector. And you can nominate your deserving colleagues, volunteers or fundraisers. Just email us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or get in touch through the links in the show notes. You can even send us a voice message that we could play out in the next episode. So, Piers, who are your superstars this week?
It's a slightly long one this week, Tim, but he is so inspirational, so bear with me. My superstar is John Woodman, who instead of planning for retirement is taking on the incredible Everest in the Alps challenge this March out in Verbier. The challenge involves teams taking on the height equivalent of Everest on skis over in the Swiss Alps. That's a staggering total of 8,848 metres. All teams taking part will ascend over 2,500 metres each day to reach their target, burning off the equivalent calories of running several back-to-back marathons on each of the 4 days. What's even more remarkable, more humbling and more inspiring is that John was diagnosed with a glioblastoma brain tumour around this time last year after a sudden seizure. John and the rest of his 12-person team are currently deep in training for this gruelling expedition, and at the time of his recording, Tim, funds for his team have reached over a staggering £124,000 of their £250,000 target. Now, all funds from the teams will go to supporting the Everest Centre, which is a research centre and programme out in Heidelberg, Germany, that aims to find new treatments for brain tumours. And that works closely alongside the Brain Tumour Charity. So I've got skin in the game here with this mention. Everest in the Alps was set up by Rob and Tanya Ritchie, inspired by their own son Toby's brain tumour diagnosis. And it's been going on now since 2015. Unfortunately for the Everest in the Alps and for us as well, TV personality and one of our high-profile supporters of the Brain Tumour Charity, Phil Spencer, has also taken part about 3 times, I think. He absolutely loved it. To date, Everest in the Alps and the expeditions have raised over $5 million for vital research. So this year, John adds his name to the long list of adventurers taking on the Alps. And John says, "Since I've been on this journey, I've been amazed not only by the care that I've received from medical professionals, but also by the exciting progress that's been made in treatments for this devastating disease, particularly in the fields of AI and immunotherapy. Fitting in hardcore training around hospital appointments and physical setbacks has been arduous, but knowing that we can make a real difference in outcomes for brain cancer sufferers makes it all worthwhile." John goes on to say, I can't wait for the challenge itself. Climbing the height of Everest with a fantastic group of people, all for a great cause. What could be better? So huge respect to John, his team, and everyone supporting Everest in the Alps as they head to the slopes in the first week of March in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, that's incredible. Amazing numbers there, Piers. That's it already raised to under 24,000 and they haven't started yet. That's incredible. Amazing.
Yes, it is incredible numbers, and also incredibly arduous as well. I remember when Phil Spencer took it out there, temperatures dropped to nearly -30 on a couple of the nights and stuff. So this is no mean feat for anyone who's, completely fit and ailment free, let alone John, who's doing it with a brain tumor. So just an incredible achievement, incredible challenge all round.
Yeah, let's keep an eye on that and tell people how it gets on as and when it happens. My superstar this week, actually, it's a posthumous superstar this week in memory of a lady called Jean Bishop. So she was a fundraiser and she dressed as a bee while she raised tens of thousands of pounds for AIDS UK. And she's going to be honoured with a special day of celebration to mark all that she did. Now, Jean was a familiar figure on the streets of Hull wearing her striking bee outfit. And she was known as the Bee Lady. And during her time, she raised more than £125,000 and was awarded a British Empire Medal in 2017. Now, Jean, who died at the age of 99 in 2021, had a care centre for the elderly in Hull named after her. She was also handed a Pride of Britain award, which was presented to her by David Walliams, dressed in a bee outfit. Now, I don't know if that was whether she was dressed in a bee outfit or whether that was David Walliams dressed in a bee outfit. I imagine, probably knowing him, probably him as well. So maybe there's two bees on that day. Anyway, Age UK in Hull and East Yorkshire is planning an annual Bee Lady Day for the 13th of May, which was Jean's birthday, to mark all that she did. The charity said it wanted to honour Jean's legacy and inspire future generations of fundraisers by raising the additional £100,000 she had been planning to raise before she died. Kaylee Carter, fundraising coordinator for Age UK Hull and East Yorkshire, said the charity aimed to keep her legacy alive as she inspired thousands, and we want to keep that going. She said, we want to help inspire a new generation of fundraisers and say to people, you could be the next Jean Bishop and follow in her footsteps, as she did some amazing things, and you can do that too. So an amazing lady. The Bee Lady. Kiss to the Bee Lady.
A fantastic legacy. I love that story. So that's a wrap for episode 19. Huge thanks to Simon for inspiring us with some great insights into the world of charity films. We'll bring you all the winners from the Smileys in a future show. But talking of insights, there's plenty more to come over the next few episodes, Tim.
Yep, that's right. In the next show, we've got a fascinating insight into the power of collaboration when we talk to two of those involved in a groundbreaking piece of research between BrainKind and Women's Aid. And after that, we're going to look at how charities of all sizes can harness the power of celebrity. So plenty of reasons to follow or subscribe to the show.
Don't forget, you could be part of the show too. Whatever your role in the third sector, just send us your voice messages or get in touch through any of the links in the show notes to share your stories and tell us what you'd like us to cover.
And of course, we also want to know who your superstar fundraisers, volunteers or colleagues are too. So head to the show notes and share their brilliance with the rest of us.
And in the meantime, please follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform and leave us a review, both of which will help others to find the show.
So that's it for episode 19. Thanks for listening. Take care and we'll see you soon.